Amen. Amen. If you want to join me this morning, Genesis 23. Genesis 23. And in reflecting on this one, I remember the verse where it talks about the foolishness of preaching. That's always a wonderful verse to come back to when you're a pastor, where the Bible basically is like, yeah, your job is foolishness. And have you ever stopped and thought about the fact that the Bible does, the foolishness of preaching? We take what God says in like this summarized, condensed form, and God can say it in 20 words, and then we unpack it and make it into like 2,000 words. It's like brevity is the art of, what is it? Brevity is the soul of wit, and preaching is not that. And so this is one of those lessons that there's just a whole lot that just kind of goes without being said. And then as teaching Sunday school, I go, yeah, but I'm going to say it. We got to understand that in the original audience, they probably would have understood most of this stuff. It would have been just kind of going, oh yeah, sure. Why do you even need to explain that? But we're gonna dig in a little bit. I'm gonna fight the urge to get too nerdy on this one, because again, nerdiness does not benefit you at all. It makes me sound impressive, but I'm going to fight the urge because it's not going to be helpful. But I do want to bring out a few of kind of the cultural things going on in this verse, because this is one of those things that's kind of weird. Like we kind of roll past it and we're like, oh, look at how nice those guys are being. And when you actually look at the history of it, you go, they're just not wanting to pay their taxes. And there's a little bit more to it. So I'll make a few applications. This one is a little less immediately applicable when we're just coming off of like Isaac, and offering Isaac and all the faith that went along with that. And that one, those type of lessons just write themselves. Then you get to Genesis 23 and you're like, he's buying a burial plot. Okay, neat. I guess it's a funeral arrangement lesson. Don't know how this applies, but sure, cool. No, it's way more than that. There's a lot of stuff going on here. And really, the idea I want to kind of drill into is this idea of putting down roots. All right? And so what we are seeing here in this passage is Abraham is basically saying, okay, God has given me the seed. God has given me, he will give me the descendants. He's taken care of that part. He's also promised me the land. And Abraham really hasn't done anything with that part of the prophecy yet. He hasn't done anything about the promise of the land. He hasn't really dug in deep or done anything. He's just kind of traveled around. He's a wanderer. And we think about it, we're like, okay, well, he was just kind of living like a camper, like an RV guy, or maybe he just had a tent that he just kept putting up various places. Okay, kind of. But understand, back then, they had roads, they had cities. He could have, we saw this with Lot. Lot moved into Sodom and set up shop and moved in permanently and kind of sold his other business apparently, and he moved in for good. And so you had civilization. This isn't back in the era where these guys aren't just living in caves, grunting at each other. This is civilization. All right, they've got roads. Abraham could have taken that road and traveled straight home if he wanted to. He could have traveled back to Ur of the Chaldees and been like, hey, I'm back. That would have been really easy. In fact, when in a few chapters he needs a wife for his son, he says, go back to where I came from and find a wife from those people, because I don't want him marrying the people of the land. Partially because they're the Canaanites and they're about to be judged, so let's not intermix with that. All right, and so I want you to understand, this, we have this in our idea where we're like, well, you couldn't travel easily and we couldn't do this. No. Abraham is choosing this, and he is making this choice to basically say, I know I could travel back to where my dad is buried, and I could bury my wife there. I'm choosing not to. All right? Probably I'll use an illustration from my own life. So when I moved away from New Hampshire, so I moved from New Hampshire to Grass Valley area, I intentionally did not go back to New Hampshire for a solid year. I just chose. It wasn't that I couldn't hop on an airplane and fly back. It wasn't that I didn't have the money. I just said, you know what? Because it's our first year away, and I just really want to I don't want to purge New Hampshire from my system. I do go back every now and then. But I basically want to say that is no longer home. That's no longer, this is my home now. And so I chose to say, I am not going back for a year. And that's kind of the idea. And then when I moved away from Wolf Mountain, I moved out here to kind of Citrus Heights, Sacramento area. And I know it's only an hour drive, but I said, you know what, they need to not have me popping back up every few days to see what's going on. And so I said, I am going to intentionally not go back. And someone had asked, like, hey, will you come help with a work day? Will you help with this? And I just said, no, I'm just trying to give just so that they can kind of reset without me. And if they need help, they can call, but I'm not going to be that guy who keeps going back to where I was and popping my head in and going, so what are you doing? Why did you move that bin? Why did you do that? No, it's not my place anymore. I'm stepping away and I'm not getting involved. And if they want help, if they want to ask questions, by all means, I'm here, but I'm not going to be that guy who keeps looking over your shoulder. So I kind of cut ties to say, hey, we're done with that. Same thing with the escape room. I left the escape room, didn't touch it for several months, and now I pop back in to fix their tech every now and then because for some reason their tech likes me, this tech doesn't. But that idea where you're basically saying, I'm cutting ties, I'm not going back. That's what Abraham's doing here. Abraham is basically saying, yes, I know I could hop in a car, drive home, and I'd be good. But what he's doing here is he's saying, okay, now it's the time to put down roots. I'm going to stake a little bit of claim in this land. I know God is eventually going to give it all to me and my descendants, but he hasn't done that yet. Right now, I'm just going to buy a little foothold. So I want you to think that way as we look at this text. So without further ado, let's look at Genesis 23. All right, Genesis 23, with that understanding in the background, let's take a look because what happens is, so Abraham, he's just done the whole thing with Isaac. Now we're going to fast forward a few years, okay? Isaac is a bit older now. I mean, you can see here, Sarah was 107 and 20 years. So she's 127, okay? It's a good long life, all right? So Sarah is 127, okay? Not that the number really matters. I know there's people who get really excited about numbers. I'm not one of those people. Numbers have some significance in the Bible. I'm just not one of those guys, so I don't get too deep into that. But if you are, more power to you. I'm just going to note this. 127, Isaac is about 37 years old or so now. Okay? So she had him when she was about 90 years old. So just to kind of put it in perspective, so we have fast forwarded in the timeline about 20 years or so. Okay? So from the previous chapter to now. And so I want you to note this because, again, what God is doing is he's saying, I'm not telling you their whole life story. I'm only telling you the key moments. So we saw Abraham left. Fast forward about 10 years, that whole thing in Egypt happens. Fast forward another bunch of years, he gets the promise. Fast forward another bunch of years, it's Isaac being weaned. Fast forward another bunch of years. And so we're just kind of hopping in the middle of all these little life story moments. And so what we see here is Sarah is 127 years old, and she dies. Now, Abraham has this choice. Do I go back to where I came from, and do I bury her basically in the sepulcher with all of my ancestors and relatives, or do I start a new tradition? And that's what he's choosing to do here. He's saying, I'm not going to take her back. I'm not going to bury her with all of my family. I'm not going to go back to the family orchard and make sure everybody's buried together. He says, no, I'm starting something new because that place is no longer my home. And I want us to understand that it's not because he didn't have a way to get back. It is literally, he could have, and he chose not to. All right? Because again, in like 3 chapters, he's going to send someone back there to go get a wife. So the roads were there. The ability was there. He could have traveled. He is making this choice and this sacrifice on purpose to say, let's get some permanence in this land. Okay? That's why I said there's a little bit of more nerdiness to this one. I'm going to try to keep it as applicable as possible, but I want us to understand what's going on here. So verse 1, Sarah is 127 years old, and these were the years of the life of Sarah. And Sarah died in Kirjath Arba, the same as Hebron in the land of Canaan. And Abraham came to mourn for Sarah and weep for her. And again, in the original context, the Jews are coming back into the land. They understand that the Canaanites are under the curse of God. They understand that this is their land, and they're going to get to conquer it. And they're going to kind of keep an eye out for this location because this is where Abraham actually bought a portion of the land. This is his. This is Abraham's land. So there's a little chunk of this land that technically is like purchased, bought. Okay, this isn't like, oh, you conquered it all. No, like He paid the people of the land for this. It was his. They're coming back for it. Okay, so there's a little bit of that going on here. Verse 3. Abraham stood up before the dead, and he spake unto the sons of Heth. And he said, I am a stranger and a sojourner with you. Give me a possession of a burying place with you, that I might bury my dead out of my sight. So he admits right off the bat. He says, I am not one of you. You know, I'm going to be living around you. I'm going to be living in your area. I've been coming and going. You guys know me. I'm not a permanent resident. Basically, he's not obligated to pay the taxes or do any of those type of things. He's just kind of traveling through, eating grass and just doing that type of stuff. Abraham wasn't eating the grass, his animals were. I mean, maybe. The Bible doesn't say. Anyway, but what he's doing is he's basically saying, let's put down some roots. Let's make this permanent. I want a place among you to bury my dead that's actually mine. Like, this is my land. All right? And I want you to notice this, because the children of Heth, Abraham is basically just asking for a cave. But the weird thing is, if he asks for just a cave, the other guy still has to pay all the taxes and all the property stuff. And so the other guy goes, yeah, I'm not giving you a cave and then taking the rest of the responsibility on myself. So what I want you to notice, it would be like this. If somebody came and they're like, hey, can I have a permanent shed in your backyard? I think a lot of us would go, yeah, I'm not comfortable with just randomly giving you a permanent location on my property. Yeah, I remember this happened years ago with a relative of mine. They bought a piece of property, and there was a family graveyard on that piece of property. The family forever has the right to go back to that family graveyard on that property. And so there was a house, and there was an orchard, and there was a blueberry patch, and there was all this other stuff, and they started a business. But because they had this little graveyard nestled in the middle of these people's property, it meant forever you're very limited on what you can do with that property, because somebody has that little graveyard right there. And then they wanted to bring their cat back and bury their cat in the graveyard and do this and this. And the people were like, what are you doing? Like, this is our property now. And they're like, yeah, but this is our graveyard. Well, you sold it. Yeah, but you didn't sell the graveyard. And so that's kind of this idea. Abraham comes up and he says, hey, I want this cave over here by the field of Machpelah. Can I have this cave? And they go, yeah, we're not just going to give you the cave. Like, you can buy the whole piece of property. We're not interested in just giving you the cave. You know, and that's partly where they're like, well, we'll just kind of give this to you, but. And Abraham's, again, he's saying, no, I want the rights to this type of stuff. So that's why they're selling it all, because they're saying, we're not going to pay the taxes on the rest of this property and let you use the cave. And so there's a lot of kind of, government stuff going on here. All right. And so Abraham, verse 4, it says, I am a stranger and a sojourner with you. Give me a possession for the burying place with you, that I may bury the dead out of my sight. And the children of Heth said unto him, hear us, O my Lord, thou art a mighty prince among us. In the choice of our sepulchres, bury thy dead. None of us shall withhold from thee a sepulchre, but that thou mightest bury thy dead. So they're like, yeah, sure, pick a graveyard. You can bury your dead in any of our graveyards. And it's that idea. Just go pick one, and they're trying to not have him have that permanent location unless he pays for it. But they're like, yeah, go ahead and just bury. Verse 7, and Abraham stood up, and he bowed himself to the people of the land, even to the children of Heth. And he communed with them, and he said, if it be in your mind that I might bury my dead out of my sight, hear me, and entreat for me for Ephron the son of Zohar, that he may give me the cave of Machpelah, which he hath, which is at the end of the field. For as much money as it is worth, he shall give it to me as a possession of a burying place among you. And Ephron dwelt among the children of Heth. And Ephron the Hittite answered Abraham in the audience of the children of Heth, even all that came in the gates of the city. And so what this is, again, this is, like I said, I'm trying to explain the context without getting too nerdy. It is basically a government proceeding taking place in the gate of a city. Okay? This is the same as coming into a courtroom, and all of your stuff is recorded, and there's a public witness to say, yeah, these are the agreements, these are the negotiations, he paid this, he did that. And it's all taking place in the gate of the city, so that way no one could say, well, you cheated me. It's, okay, did you guys all see the thing that happened here, right here, in the gate of the city? This is kind of what's referenced when it talks about him sitting there in the gate of the city when the people walk in, and he stands up. That's why we get the impression that Lot was some sort of ruler in the city, because this is where you did a lot of your government business, was right here at the entrance to the city. And so that's what's going on. This is a government, kind of a business deal going on. They're exchanging paperwork. They're signing all the county forms and, getting notarized and all that. Like all of that's what's going on here in the gate of the city. Okay? So we don't do that way anymore. We go to a courtroom or we go to a notary and they sign it and we have the witnesses who sign. That's what we do today. They just did it all in the court of public. And here's all your witnesses, 2 or 3. Okay, good. All right, we all agreed on this? Okay. You wait it out. Okay, that's your land now. Take it and go. Like, that's what's going on, okay? And verse 10, and Ephron dwelt among the children of Heth. Ephron was a Hittite. He answered Abraham in the audience of the children of Heth, even all that went in at the gate of the city, and he said, Nay, my lord, hear me. The field I give thee, and the cave that is in therein, I give it thee, in the presence of the sons of the people, give I thee, bury thy dead. And Abraham bowed himself to the people of the land, and he spake unto Ephron in the audience of the people. And he said, But if thou wilt give it, I pray thee, hear me. I will give thee money for the field, take it of me, and I will bury my dead there. So again, this is kind of your typical Middle Eastern negotiation, going back and forth and honor and all that stuff, okay? So they're just negotiating back and forth. But again, what he's doing is he's saying, I'm not going to give you just the cave. I'm not interested in selling you just the cave. If you're going to buy it, you might as well take the whole piece of property because otherwise I have to pay taxes on all this. And then I'm stuck with a cave just in the middle of my property. So let's just take it all. Okay, if you're going to take the field, take it all. Okay? Verse 14, Ephron answered unto Abraham, and he said, Okay, the land is worth 400 shekels of silver, but what is that between me and you? Bury therefore thy dead. And so he basically given him a moderate amount that he owes. He says, here it is, here's what you owe. Abraham goes on Zillow, looks up the price, says, cool, let's negotiate this one a little bit. And 400 shekels of silver, they find the nearest gate, and they trade the money. All right, that's basically what's going on here is he's saying, how much is your field worth? This amount. Okay, cool. Now, we're not sure exactly how much property he bought. The rabbis have gotten very excited over this. I'll read you some of the symbolism they read into it. I don't read much symbolism into it because, like I said, I'm not really a guy who gets excited about numbers. I know there's a significance there and stuff, but I don't want to go Harold camping on this. I don't know if I've explained that illustration. A few years ago, do you remember when it was like 2012, it's going to be the end of the world, the church age is over? Okay. I don't know if you caught on. That didn't happen. So I think we can safely mock that now. Anyway, but I remember standing there, and I was filling gas, and some guy came up to me. He's like, what do you think about that whole 2012 being the end of the year thing? And even back then, I was like, it's not going to happen. I mean, the Bible says no man knows the day or the hour, and this guy comes and says, oh, but I do. If you want to know how he got that number, it was reading too much into the numbers of the Bible. Basically what he did is there's a spot where they're fishing, and they pull up an exact number of fish, and he goes, this exact number of fish is the number of years left in the church age. And if we start it from this date and we go that many years forward, that's 2012. It's, whatever. And you're like, okay. And he's like, oh, I got it wrong because I started with the wrong starting date. Actually, and it's like, calm down. I'm not sure the significance of that number. I'm sure there is, but I'm pretty sure it's not the number of years left in the church age, because no one has ever taken it that way. But that's the thing. If you're someone who loves numbers, and I know some guys who, I knew a guy, one of my Sunday school teachers, he did a whole Sunday school series of the number 1 in the Bible, and the number 2 in the Bible, and the number 3, and I was like, ooh, this is going to be a very long series. It's gonna put my series to shame. But thankfully he skipped a few numbers because they don't show up too often. But he was starting, and I was like, oh boy, this is going to happen. Okay, numbers have meaning, but yeah, let's not get too far. The Jewish rabbis, they really, really love to put a whole lot of stock in numbers. Like this one right here, they calculated out to be, well, if you have this much land, it's the amount of space that one adult human needs. And if you calculate that out, you get 600,000. And 600,000 is also the number of people who came up out of Egypt. And you're like, hold on, I'm going to stop you right there. How did you get that number? How did you get that number? It's significant and it's symbolic. And you're like, but the Bible talks about thousands and thousands and millions, and it doesn't give us those precise numbers. It's like, yeah, but the rabbi told it. Okay. And so just be very careful. I'll suffice it to say this. We don't know how much field he bought. Okay? We know how much field was harvestable. But if you've ever bought a piece of property or wandered a piece of property, you understand you could have 2 or 3 acres that you could farm on, and then you have like 3 acres of forest. And you're like, okay, that's 6 acres of land. So you bought 6 acres, right? Yeah. But only 3 acres were harvestable. Okay, cool. We don't know. All that's given here is he bought a few acres that you could make a farm out of and a cave. How big's the cave? I don't know. Doesn't really matter. It's enough that you can bury a few people in it. Okay, so it could be a massive cave, could be like a dungeon. We don't know. It's a cave. Now, if you go over there, you can go find out by walking in it. But the idea is there's a cave that will last. So when the children of Israel come back up out of the land, they're going to bury more people in that cave. That cave's going to be really important. But there's also a field that goes along with it to kind of say, okay, I'm not going to be a wanderer anymore. I'm buying this field. I'm buying a piece of property that I could grow crops on. He's not going to be a itinerant shepherd forever. Like, he's now putting down roots. And so I want you to see this. These are the negotiations going on, and we don't know all of the details. Because again, the details don't matter, not to this. Okay? But again, rabbis and other people through the years have tried to kind of break it apart and come up with a significant meaning here and symbolic stuff. Whatever, maybe. But what is the point? What is he actually trying to get at here? It's saying, I bought a piece of land. I own this piece of land. I am responsible for this piece of land. And now, it's mine. It's where I'm going to bury my dead. And I'm setting up the stage to say, now my descendants, when they come back, they're going to bury their dead here too. So now we've set up a foothold in this land. We're not just wanderers anymore. Okay? I want to make a comparison kind of like to us as a church, kind of in our transition time here. We've been living as wanderers for a long, long time. We've been living in this facility, but we've been renting month to month, which means at any moment we can move. What does that do to you? Like, what does that do to you in your head when you're living in a spot that you go, this could end at any moment? You don't do a whole lot that's permanent. You do improvements and you build stuff, and but when you do an improvement, what are you doing? You're going, I'm going to do this improvement with the understanding that it should be movable. You're not laying a concrete pad and doing this. You're putting up a tent. Now, that can be really good for missionary work. That can be really good for short-term itinerant work. That can be really, really good to kind of keep kind of that agile movement. But over time, what do you start doing? You say, no, has God called us to this area permanently? Yep. So why don't we put down permanent roots? Why do we keep living temporarily? Okay, why don't we invest and actually make this permanent? And God might not lead you to do that. I mean, look at Abraham. He lived in an itinerant form for 50, 60 years. Okay? That's what he did. He lived in this wandering mode, but there came a point where he says, okay, let's put down roots. Now, when you're permanent, when you've put down roots, what does that do to your thinking? Okay, you're no longer renting. It's now your house. And so if you've lived that, where you've rented for a while and you've lived in a house, you understand the difference between how you treat a house that you rent versus how you treat a house that you own. There's a lot of stuff that when you're renting that house, you go, that's not my problem. I don't care about that. I don't think, nope. And so I remember when I lived at camp, technically the house was ours, but we could be kicked out of it at any moment because if there was a bigger family than ours that needed the house, they could move us out and move us into a different house. That completely changes your thinking. So there came a point where they wanted to put an air conditioner in. And so they were asking us to pitch in some money toward the air conditioner system so that we could have something better than a swamp cooler, which if you've ever lived with a swamp cooler, you understand they're not good. They're not comfortable. They don't work, especially in the humidity of the mountains. You're like, swamp coolers are useless. But when you're looking and you're going, I'm going to drop thousands of dollars in an air conditioner system for a house that I don't own and that I could get kicked out of at any moment. Why would I do that? And so what did it do? It changed your thought process to go, I'm not buying that air conditioner system so that potentially someone else could just take it from me at a moment's notice. You invest your money in different ways. You try to stay mobile. And so I want us to kind of think that way, where there is a different mindset when you're a wanderer as opposed to setting up shop. There's certain things you do that you're like, this is mine now, as opposed to someone else's problem. So I want us to kind of think that through, because what Abraham's doing now is he's saying, I'm putting down roots, but not just for myself, for my descendants. I'm basically laying out the groundwork to say, you have a right to this. You have a right to this land. You're thinking ahead. Every one of us who's ever planted a tree, let's say you plant a tree that takes 70 years to mature. Are you planting that tree for yourself? Not really. Who are you planting that tree for? For the next generation. Are you going to build it on land that you're renting? Or are you going to build it on land that you own? That you own. So that kind of idea where you're saying, what I'm doing for the next generation, and hopefully you're doing it in a spot that will be permanent. That won't be just the next guy comes in and goes, I don't know why that's there, and just rips it up. Right? And so again, that's what's going on here, is Abraham is laying out the groundwork and saying, I'm putting down roots. I might not be the one who comes back again, who knows? But this is the idea. This is my land. I'm responsible for taking care of it. This is my property. All right? And so look what happens. So they mete out the shekels of silver, and that's where a lot of that symbolism comes in. Verse 17, and the field of Ephron, which was in Machpelah, which was before Mamre, the field, the cave that was therein, and all the trees that were in the field, and all the borders round about were made sure. Okay, so they just said, okay, let's make sure we've got everything laid out right. Let's get the surveyors out here. They're going to actually mark out. This is the other thing. When you look in the law and it talks about removing not the ancient landmarks, I know a lot of people get really excited and they're like, don't move the ancient landmarks, therefore never change anything. Okay, technically, metaphorically, there is some standard to that. But really, when the Bible says remove not the ancient landmarks, that was talking about literal landmarks they would put to mark out your field, to say this is the boundary line between your property and the other people's property. And so when it talked about not removing the ancient landmarks, it's basically saying, don't steal someone else's land. Don't steal what doesn't belong to you. That's what that metaphor means. Now, of course, we can make other applications to it, but why was that so important? Because what Abraham is doing here is he gets the surveyors out. They mark out the boundary of the whole property. They lay out the landmarks and say, I own between this weird rock right here and that weird rock right there. That's my boundary line. So if you build a fence and it creeps its way across that boundary line, it's on my land. So get it off. But what the neighbor could do is, if he was dishonest, he could pull an Ahab and go, oh, well, we're just going to move this a little bit. I want this field too. And that's the idea of don't remove the ancient landmarks. Because again, if I've got a landmark and I'm going, it's the weird rock that looks like a face, that's my boundary line. And I find that weird rock that looks like a face, and it's now 20 feet over this direction. You've just stolen a huge amount of land from me. That's why you don't remove the ancient landmarks. Leave them where they are, they're boundary lines. And that's what Abraham's doing. He's saying, let's secure, make sure all these boundary lines are exactly where they are. Now, what's unfortunate is where they put the verse reference here. As you read this, you'll notice that literally between verses 17 and 18, there is no punctuation at all. It quite literally is all one sentence. It's even in the middle of a phrase. So just keep that in mind as you're reading this. I stopped at the end of verse 17, but it's a sentence, so it keeps going. So it says this, verse 17, in the field of Ephron, which was in Machpelah, which is before Mamre the field, the cave which was therein, all the trees that were in the field and all the borders round about were made sure unto Abraham for possession in the presence of the children of Heth, before all that went in at the gate of the city. Okay, so 17 and 18, just one big sentence. So they're securing it. They've checked the landmarks. Everything's good. Verse 19. Verse 19. And after this, Abraham buried Sarah his wife in the cave in the field of Machpelah before Mamre. The same as in Hebron in the land of Canaan. And the field and the cave that was therein were made sure unto Abraham for a possession, for a burying place by the sons of Heth. And so the Bible takes this moment to kind of stop and say, okay, this is what's going on. And I want us to understand, it is putting down roots, but ultimately this as well is an act of faith. What do you do when you take on the debt, when you do all of that and say, I am buying a piece of property in this land? I mean, what's going through your mind when you say, I am doing this? I mean, nowadays you put down a certain amount, the bank says, we'll loan you this amount, and then you're setting up payments for the next 30 years. So you set up those payments for the next 30 years, and you're paying that amount of money every month for the next 30 years. What are you saying? You're saying, I plan to be here. for the next 30 years. You're putting down roots and you're saying, okay, I have lived here for 40 years myself. Lord willing, I'll be here for another 30. And after that point, no debt, scot-free, everything's good. And that's the idea. Whereas if you choose, like Abraham was up until this point, if you choose, so to speak, to keep renting, what are you implicitly saying when you choose to keep renting month by month? I'm not actually planning to be here long term. I mean, I'll be here for a while, but I'm just going to keep going at this rate, and I can pull out whenever I want to. That's kind of the implication when you rent. Again, Abraham had enough money that he could buy a piece of property. He just chose to live as a wanderer. But now what he's doing is he's saying, I got the money, and I'm also making it a statement of faith to say, I'm planning to stick around. And so I want us to kind of see that where again, there's a lot of really cool applications. Now there also is, and I think when it comes to an act of faith, I do think there has to be a public declaration of some of this. And so again, it's kind of an interesting aspect where he does all this in the presence of the people. He's not just subtly, digging a little hole in the ground and putting his tent stakes a little deeper. He's coming to the people of the land and saying, I'm planning to stick with you. I'm planning to be here. I'm buying a piece of property among you. And now he's no longer a wanderer. He owns a several acre piece of land that he could farm if he wanted to. And so he's now saying, I'm no longer a wanderer. I've got my son. My son is the whopping age of 37 now, so he probably should move out of the he's got another 40 years before he moves out of the house if he keeps my pattern. But what he's doing is he's basically saying, hey, let's put down roots. This is the land God promised, and we're going to start living like it. And so again, really cool applications there. But again, there's chapter 23. And again, a lot more we could say. But again, one last thing that's more of a pattern thing is basically he's now setting up a pattern of saying we're going to bury our dead here. And so that pattern is going to carry out for the next few generations where they're going to keep bringing people back to this spot and bury their dead there. And so even Joseph, when they come up out of the land of Egypt, says, don't forget my body. Do not leave me in Egypt. I mean, obviously, they're not going to travel up to the land of Canaan to bury Joseph. Joseph's buried. His bones are left there. And now when they leave the land of Egypt, with all the other stuff they have to worry about, they're like, who got Grandpa Joseph? And they go and they grab his little bone box and they throw it on the cart. And it survives the whole wilderness wandering for 40 years. They've got that little cart with Joseph's bones on it. And it's just an act of faith to say, we're bringing this thing back up and we're going to bury him with Grandpa Abraham. So just interesting to think of it that way, where all of that is going on. Okay, questions or comments as we close out this lesson? Kind of a sporadic applications here and there.